I was once having a heart attack, and my family debated for about a half an hour whether or not to call 911. And after about a half an hour debate, it was a 2-to-1 vote. The dog had to break the tie. I appreciate your courtesy and the kind words. I'd really like to thank the TriMet board, Neil, the governor, and the public for this opportunity to serve the TriMet district. It has been an incredible opportunity, and I think we have all been part of the change. It began with Neil's service as general manager, but it also has been articulated by the enunciated outcomes that you folks engage in today. The enunciation of outcomes was well overdue and is very purposeful and very important. I think the community and our partners, including the ATU, need to know where TriMet is headed, how the board intends to get there, and how very important it is that we together achieve those outcomes. Those outcomes are more than transit. For about 15 of my 30 or so years in transportation, land use, and economic development, I was called the road guy. I think we're really in the community building business or in the economy building business. The encouragement I have for each of you is that we continue to work together and all be a volunteer at any moment you would like. That we build a connection between where we live, where we work, and how we get there, whether it's by walking, biking, carpooling, transit, or car, or truck. That we share that balance because our community and our economy and our environment deserve that and demand that. And then we articulate where we're headed, how we believe we're going to get there, and why it is important. And that's not just communications. That's not just advocacy. That's leadership. And I will be a part of you as a volunteer, although not a board member going forward. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Steve. All right. With that said, we're going to move on to the quarterly finance report.
Board Member Clark's are going to follow up. We'll be referring to the monthly financial packet you did receive. I'd like to start on page 7 in the statement of revenue and expenses and just highlight a few of the financial numbers that I think are important to highlight. First, on the payroll tax revenues. For the first quarter of this fiscal year, payroll tax revenue was up 7.6% over the same quarter last year. And then in the second quarter, it was up 5.7%. So year to date, we're up 6.6%. Good results. I will remind you that 1.3% of that growth is related to the payroll tax rate increase. And the last 2 years, the rate increase really dedicated to funding the operations of the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail line. At this point, though, we do project that we will end the year roughly, payroll tax will be roughly $10 million over our budgeted amount. So passenger revenues for the first 6 months of the year are about $1 million under budget. It's primarily due to this change in the student pass program from what was assumed in the budget and somewhat the return of tickets when we changed the zone system in September. We do project that we'll probably end the year about $1 million under budget for passenger revenue. Federal grants, the third major operating revenue source. Year to date, we've received $34 million, which is 43% of the annual budgeted amount. We just, because of the variation in when payroll tax federal grants are received. We just allocate the budget based on what we actually receive and we'll true it up at the end of the year. We do anticipate we'll end the fiscal year at budget or perhaps even in excess of budget related to the rail modernization program for federal grants. On the expense side, generally we're operating for the first 6 months, about 3% under budget. It's fairly common to be under budget at the beginning of the year, and we expect to end the year on the expense side very close to the budget amount and don't anticipate significant savings beyond one item, and I would highlight that, and that is in diesel fuel. We're currently paying $3.02 a gallon. The year-to-date, we've averaged $3.20, and if you remember, we budgeted $3.40 a gallon. So year-to-date savings are about $600,000. I won't speculate on where we'll end the year. There are significant unrecorded expenses that may be hitting. Some of those were discussed by Randy Stedman earlier. There was the ERB decision that awarded back pay of reimbursement of employees and retirees for medical premiums paid in 2011 and 12. Will likely cost the district an additional $3.6 million. We're considering the appeal as Randy Stedman mentioned. That has not been recorded on our books at this point. And no reserve or liability has been recorded for the various ERB decisions or cases before ERB right now. So that is something that can potentially have a major impact on expenses that is not recorded at this point. Nothing jumped out at me on the balance sheet. There haven't been really significant changes on the balance sheet since June 30, so I'll skip over that. I did want to highlight two schedules in the board packet. First is on page 5, which is a new schedule that you'll be receiving. I think you've received one other. It looks like this. It will be the summary financial report that we'll use in the months that are not quarter ends. So I just highlight that there's the 3 graphs on the right side of that include system operating expenses. Those tend to be pretty flat with adjustments at year end for certain accruals, like based on pension actuarial valuations and reserve studies for our self-insurance reserves. Revenues, the graph just above that. The major variations that you see are almost always related to the revenue recognition of operating grants, which really jump around. And the GASB accounting rules require us to only virtually recognize grant revenue on a cash basis. Slightly different, but it's almost the way it comes out. And then the top graph is what we're trying to show is how we're doing against our unrestricted fund balance policy. The red line represents the minimum benchmark that the board has established of 2.5 times monthly operating expense, and the blue line is actual. We're currently at $116.7 million of unrestricted fund balance, which is just under 3 months of operating expenses. On page 6, the next page, is a new graph included to show the difference between unrestricted working capital, unrestricted fund balance, and unrestricted cash and investments. You can see working capital and fund balance track very closely. The only difference there really is how we account. Working capital is kind of an accounting concept, current assets minus current liabilities, where fund balance is more an Oregon budget law number. The difference being with our liability reserves for workers' compensation and personal injury and property damage are broken out on the balance sheet between current and non-current liabilities. But for fund balance, the full amount is expensed in the period that the claim happens or the accident occurs. So the whole thing is expensed and the fund balance is reduced at that point. So that's why they track almost perfectly, but they're not exactly the same.
And these figures are in millions?
Yes. Cash obviously jumps around a lot more based on primarily, again, operating grants. Payroll tax revenues come in the second month of each quarter. And then on the expense side, the major variation is related to pension funding, which is just done annually in August or September. I guess, just to summarize, I would just say, based on the year-to-date numbers, the first 2 quarters are obviously good results that do give us a little breathing room. However, the fundamental long-term financial issues of TriMet really are not changed. We have obviously a very, very large unfunded retiree medical obligation ranging somewhere between $800 and $900 million. We have significant underfunded pension plans. The liability there is about $300 million. And I think we have important needs to dedicate more resources to capital maintenance and replacement. I would value that at roughly $5 to $10 million of additional resources needed per year for that program as well. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it. Finance and Audit Committee report, Director Schweitzer.
Thank you. We met last on January 9th, so I'm reading from these notes to try and help me remember here. Darlene, she's here, she reviewed an internal audit that was being done. There were 12 internal audit follow-up reviews. And the reviews focused primarily on operations division programs and also involved the safeguarding of farebox revenue. In particular, ticket vending machines and money room controls. So what she found was there's some trouble findings regarding the ticket vending machines, maintenance records, and that's something that we discussed at the meeting and we'll further look into as we go. Neil is implementing changes that highlight the importance of management places on these issues as well. The committee did hold its annual review of TriMet's investment policies. There were no material changes were proposed. The investment policy changes have been reviewed and approved by the Oregon Short-Term Fund Board. The revised investment policy will be before the full board in February. So there was a discussion about how we go about educating everybody as well as the public as we get into our strategic financial plan for the year, and so that will be coming before all of you in the next couple of months. We discussed the status of TriMet's strategic financial plan, and this plan, as I just said, is a work in progress, but it's on schedule to be reviewed and adopted by the full board during the upcoming budget approval process. So the issues involved in the plan, we'll be talking about them at briefings as well as the board meetings, and there will be a series of public meetings before anything gets voted on. So that's my report. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Okay, and last on the reports, the Committee on Accessible Transportation, Dr. Bethel.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have the 2 reports before you from our last 2 CAT meetings. Just a couple other things, just want to reiterate that CAT has had some concern about, among others. Number one would be the service to clients that have been affected by the born withdrawal. As we are aware, January 1 made that official, and so those that were dependent on Lyft and Lyft services in that area are facing some issues in terms of how that service is being replaced. And so CAT has expressed some concerns about that. Secondly, going along with accessibility, and on our January 21st meeting on the new fixed route buses, there's still a discussion about accessibility of the ramps, which the TriMet staff has addressed and is addressing at this point, but also the concern about how the design will be for the new Type 5 cars that will be coming and will be ordered very soon, and possibility of a few changes that they would like to discuss for future orders of the new buses that we will be replacing. Just want to keep us aware of those in case any of those information come before us, that we will be ready to do some action on that. Other than that, nothing else to report from CAT. Very thankful to the staff that comes to the CAT meetings and their ability to respond as quickly as they do to questions that are being asked. And I'll take any questions if there are any.
Questions here? I'm just curious on the boring withdrawal. I mean, that issue, it sounded, I read, I think, in the report that's later on in our agenda that Reach and a couple others are actually looking at some ways to help restore some service out there. Is that part of the discussion?
That's part of the discussion about how the services are restored, and realizing that some of the services aren't going to provide exactly what TriMet was providing. For some of the replacement, the scheduling has to be several weeks in advance in order to get a driver to be able to volunteer and drive under some situations. So that is a concern being raised, that those clients would have almost as adequate service as TriMet was providing. This is one of the issues that was raised even during the time of the withdrawal discussion and then final decision. What would happen to service, and particularly the clients who were using Lyft service in that area.
So it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bethel. All right. With that concludes our reports. Let's move on to the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one motion. We have two items on the consent agenda. One is the approval of the minutes of our meeting of December 12th and a resolution authorizing us to apply for Federal Transit Administration federal formula grants. So is there any of those two that any members of the board would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? And that motion is approved unanimously. Okay, moving on to the resolutions. I think the first one I was just talking about is Resolution 1301-02, adopting a coordinated transportation plan for elderly and people with disabilities. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, this plan is before you as a recommendation that comes to us from the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee, or STFAC. And it's a 23-member group that is actually representing a lot of the agencies that together provide the level of services that help elderly people with disabilities. Part of our responsibility as a key designee in this and leader of this overall effort is that we are here actually to adopt and required to adopt a plan on a regular basis called I'll get it right, Coordinated Transportation Plan for Elderly and People with Disabilities, or CTP, I'll call it for it. And it's an important plan because really it begins to, first of all, inventory all those services, brings those people into a conversation about how best to coordinate and provide those services, and then map out strategies that are indeed helping to provide the continuum of services that are noted. And our LIFT program and the Ride Connection services and many of the other, for example, Senior Services Center are part of that continuum as outlined in the plan. We think it's a very important document. Again, it's really developed to a large extent by the STFAC, which is a very broad representative group. Members of the CAT participate as well as the other agencies that are participating. And again, the follow-on resolution will show you the importance of this plan because it actually, the plan is required as a prerequisite to the federal funds that we otherwise distribute as a lead agency in this area. So with that, I'd be happy to defer any questions to staff or answer those that I might be able to myself, if I do recommend approval.
We have some questions or comments on the staff report or the report itself. I guess I'd just say I read the report, found it very interesting, very thorough. Clearly the groups that are involved in this are very passionate about their work, and it shows in terms of the effort. It sounds like there's a lot of coordination that everybody believes we can do more of, so I'm really pleased to see the report and what it said. It kind of mapped out where we need to go in the future, so I look forward to seeing some of the work of this group as it progresses over the next few years and addresses things like the boring problems we have in service delivery. So having no other questions or comments, is there a motion to approve resolution 13-01-02? Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion approving resolution 13-01-02, which is adopting the coordinated transportation plan for elderly and people with disabilities. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on to resolution 13-01-03, approving the fiscal year 13-15 Special Transportation Fund, known as STF, discretionary grant program, and the FY13 STF formula grant program to improve services for elderly and persons with disability, and authorizing the general manager to enter into agreements with transportation providers. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, as noted previously, this is really the implementing step, if you will, one of the key implementing steps called for in that CTP. And the same committee that we were talking about actually reviews the applications that we receive as the state's special transportation agency, STF agency, that administers the distribution of these funds. And again, we're advised by the STFAC committee, which the membership is noted in the staff report. I won't go through that, but very widespread representation from throughout the region and within this district. The committee met a number of times, sifted through the recommendations, and out of that process, the list of recommendations before you are here. One thing that I would particularly note about this is that this is an area where TriMet really has strategically focused on helping to grow services outside of our normal service that we provide ourselves. So in other words, and we have had conversations about this in the past, which is the ability to provide service outside of the lift formula, help reduce the growth in overall lift rides, which we know is an expense, and that there are cheaper ways to provide some of those rides, and actually higher quality ways to provide some of those rides. And so through the development of these alternate services, we believe that we are contributing to what we now see as the flattening of overall lift rides. Some of you may remember a few years back we were very nervous about the growth in lift rides. We were seeing 10-12% annual growth rates on lift service. Recently, lift ridership has been flat, actually down a little bit this last month. So a combination of efforts have really led to that, but I would say that these grants and the development of these alternate services, particularly the Ride Connection and some of the other grantees, have been really key in providing other avenues for people to meet their mobility needs. And so we think it's been very successful, and would recommend your approval of the resolution and a list of grantees that are attached.
Questions? Yes.
Mr. General Manager, my concern is In this document, we speak about working very closely with Ride Connection. And as I look through the allocations of the funds and know that the committee provided those, even in the overall formula and then in the discretionary, there's a lot of line items that are connected with Ride Connection in one way or the other. My caution is that we, nor the committee, builds Ride Connection to become the quote-unquote monopolizing force in terms of doing this. And all the other groups that may want to provide or are providing these particular services do not have to broker exclusively through Ride Connection. I want us to be very careful that we aren't setting up that type of situation. Just a concern. I have nothing to level against Ride Connection, but a caution when you see the same name connected with a service keep popping up line after line after line, and a disproportionate share of dollars coming to that one entity. That sets up more of control. If I'm controlling the dollars, then I certainly control the service, and I control who does and who does not provide the service. And want to be careful about that, and also careful about and raising concern about where we place persons who are connected with in positions of committees and certain things where they aren't directly involved and have a potential of a conflict of interest.
If I may just address those questions. First of all, I would say that in all these cases, there is an open competition for these grants, and in no way do we point anybody to Ride Connection first. But one of the reasons I think you see Ride Connection coming up is actually they do a very good job, and to the extent that that's based on a sort of, if you will, a meritocracy, or the merit of Ride Connection on services, that's a good thing. But I think you're absolutely right that that's the best way to keep them sharp in terms of being the best place for many of these providers to go, is to make sure that it's not an exclusive club, if you will. So I can assure you on this regard that there is no favoritism associated with Ride Connection in that regard. But I'd also assure you that from all of our knowledge, Ride Connection does a very superb job of leveraging resources from a number of different sources and creating these sort of combined pools of funds, both from donations and foundations and other, as well as these grants that really end up, I think, really being advantageous to the riders. And I think that's the service to the riders that is what we're really focused on. And I agree with you about committee composition, and that's one of the checks the board, I think, needs to make, is to make sure that these committees are not, in a fox hen house situation. But again, we are looking for people that have a certain expertise and knowledge of the services that are out there and knowledge of the user base. And so there is a delicate balance associated with that, which, as you're very aware. So I would just I would take on board the caution that you.
So you've mentioned a couple times in regards to superb performance and those things like that. How do we gauge that? Is it mostly financial and how well their cost per ride, or does it include other things such as customer and satisfaction and things of that sort? Maybe a balanced scorecard look at these providers and how well they're delivering the service.
I'd ask, is Claire here? She's not here with you. There is an effort to review the. I don't know the specifics, but what your notion about looking at a number of parameters, I think, is appropriate. Certainly, cost is one. The other part is leverage. The other part is service to the customers and the quality of that service. Another element in this case, frankly, because of the services that are often the ability to attract and retain volunteers on this. So there's a number of avenues that one needs to look at, I agree, related to performance of these grants. And as you know, many of the grants are up to other public agencies such as Wilsonville Smart or the far suburban transit districts that are independent from us as well. And they do their own monitoring and measure the performance much as we do.
Okay. Any other questions from this end? All right. Well, seeing that with that, are we ready to move forward to take action on resolution 1301-03?
So moved.
I hear a motion.
Second.
I hear a second. So with that, if there's no further discussion, and all those in favor of the motion approving resolution 13-01-L3, which is approving the FY13-15 Special Transportation Fund Discretionary Grant Program and the FY13 Special Transportation Fund Formula Grant Program to improve services for the elderly and persons with disabilities, and authorizing the general manager to enter into these agreements with our transportation providers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Okay, we're going to move on to resolution 13-01-04, with this, which is authorizing a smoke-free work environment policy. And I will point out we have about 3 people who would like to testify on this matter. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, very much appreciate your consideration of this item. The TriMet code currently, as you know, includes as a prohibited activity on the district transit system smoking. And we're very specific about that. But in an irony, TriMet's workplaces are not necessarily smoke-free. Now, I would note that our work spaces, internal spaces, are smoke-free by policy, and under state law, smoking is not allowed within 10 feet of an entrance or air intake. So while our buildings tend to be mostly smoke-free, our overall workplaces, some of which are outside, are not smoke-free. And behind all of this is, as you well know, is our knowledge about what smoking does to our workforce. The Surgeon General declared that there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke, no safe exposure. And we know that exposure to secondhand smoke results in higher worker absenteeism, respiratory disease, lower productivity, increased health insurance costs, and increased claims for diseases related to exposure. And we have calculated roughly that the cost of smoking in TriMet is between $2 and $3 million annually. We also know addiction to tobacco is very powerful, strong addiction, and difficult for people to quit. So I wanted to note that this resolution, while it adopts the policy, it gives me the latitude to implement this as we advance our non-smoking policies and alternate choices with our employees. So, for example, I mentioned earlier we have a sign-up going on right now, which is when we pull the operators together to choose the routes. And I would note that both Regis and Kaiser have representatives from their smoking cessation programs there to work with the operators. We'll continue that. We'll continue to offer programs both on the campus and more broadly. And our current view is that we would like to implement this policy beginning around July 1st of this year. But again, we want to make sure that we've been in good communication with our workforce, that we've offered people the programs that our insurance programs and our employee assistance program offers in terms of smoking cessation, because our goal is not to be mean. Our goal is to actually hopefully help people improve their health through stopping smoking. So with that, I'll pause and recommend adoption of this policy.
I think before we get into questions here, why don't we hear from the folks who want to testify, and then we can see if we have questions from either staff or the testifiers. I have the first 2 people, and I asked them to come up, Mel Kahn and Brett Hamilton. And I will point out we do have written testimony from both of you in front of us right now. So, Mr. Kahn, would you like to go first?
I would, President Warner, members of the board, thank you. For the record, I'm Dr. Mel Cohn. I'm the State Public Health Officer and the Director of the Public Health Division at the Oregon Health Authority. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and commend you for hopefully passing this resolution. I think it's really shows great leadership on your part. As Mr. McFarland already noted, there is no safe level of exposure to tobacco smoke. In Oregon alone, every year, about 7,000 people die from tobacco-related illnesses, and that makes tobacco still the leading preventable cause of death and disability in our state. In fact, that number of people, if you think about it, it's enough to fill roughly 117 TriMet buses to capacity each year. So that is a lot of people, and it's also very expensive. It costs our state, and has already been noted, TriMet, it costs the state $2.4 billion a year, roughly, in costs. And you know, those are the financial costs. Of course, there's a huge human toll to the pain and suffering that goes along with those deaths. Now, a policy requiring smoke-free campuses and properties is important in a couple of ways, but most importantly, I think it helps employees quit. We know that most smokers actually want to quit. It helps support them when they make that choice, and it also protects people from exposure to secondhand smoke. So with this resolution, you would be improving employee health, reduce employee absenteeism, increase productivity, and also reduce the amount of cigarette butt litter that, of course, is expensive and messy to clean up. And I think it's important to point out that the impact of this policy is probably going to be especially powerful on two vulnerable groups. That's low-income people who may not have other options for transportation other than TriMet. And for low-income people, we know that low-income people smoke at roughly 3 times the rate of higher-income people. It's a very, very large health disparity, and so I think that's an important aspect of this. In addition, young people who are using TriMet to get back and forth to work, using their transit, to school, using their transit pass, again, another group that this would help protect. So I think this resolution demonstrates your commitment to employee and rider wellness and will contribute as well to improving the health of the region as an employer and a public agency. You won't be alone in that. Across Oregon, more and more employers are establishing tobacco and smoke-free policies, and your efforts here are in full alignment with the work that the county health departments in the region and across the state are doing. The health departments do have tobacco prevention coalitions that have been working on issues like this, and this is fully in line with what they've been working on. Now, last August, I want to mention that Governor Kitzhaber signed an executive order that took most state properties tobacco-free by January 1st of this year. And we have some experience with doing this, and we know that strong leadership and communication, as has already been noted, and planning really were critical in doing that successfully. And I'm pleased to say that every time we've done this, because we actually did this in a couple of steps leading up to January 1st of this year, we've done it with relatively little problems that arose despite a lot of concern beforehand. And I think the two areas where a lot of work should be done, one, Mr. McFarland already noted the issue about providing cessation benefits for employees and making sure folks know what resources are available to them. This, obviously, you want to do this in a humane and supportive way. And then in any kind of facility, there are always special issues and considerations that arise, and it takes some time to do some problem solving. So as I understand it, you're going to be implementing this policy, should you pass it in July. That gives you some time to work through those issues and figure out some solutions that will work. So, you know, again, I just want to commend you for your leadership. The Health Authority fully supports this resolution and urge you to pass this. Please feel free to call on the resources we have at the Health Authority, and I know I speak for my county health department colleagues. I know Carl Bennett from Washington County is sitting in the back row there, so I know she participated in the development of this proposal as well with you. We will support you in whatever way we can moving forward. Thank you, and if you have questions now or throughout this.
Why don't you sit there for a moment, we'll see if we have any questions. Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Board of Directors and General Manager Farland. Thanks for having me today and taking the time to to really wrestle with this resolution. My name is Brett Hamilton. I'm the Executive Director for the Tobacco-Free Coalition of Oregon. TOFCO, as we're called, is a statewide non-for-profit corporation representing businesses, advocacy organizations, and individuals seeking a tobacco-free Oregon. Just to give you a little context of my background and why I'm here. Our mission is to help people quit tobacco, stopping young people from starting, and protecting everyone from secondhand smoke. So you can kind of understand why this is a very important step forward for in our organization's mind. And I don't want to repeat what Dr. Cohen says, but some of my testimony might cover some of it. I'm really going to focus on the actual cost. And I'm very delighted to have Dr. Cohen sitting next to me because he's been a real leader in this area. And the partnership has been very valuable, not to just the state, but to all the members of the state. And we're really driving down tobacco use, but we have ways to go. And this is a good step in the way to do this. So tobacco use is the leading cause of preventable death in not only Oregon, but the United States. It imposes huge healthcare and financial burden on businesses, employees, and their families. The worst cost of smoking is obviously the cost of life. However, there is also a significant cost driving our rising healthcare costs, which we need to control. The estimated cost, as Dr. Cohen mentioned, is $2.4 billion a year. Or stated a different way, a total cost of a pack of cigarettes to an Oregonian is $13.27. You take all the costs, included that. Smoking harms virtually every organ in the body, causing complex multiple cancers, heart disease, chronic respiratory diseases, and numerous other ailments. In the United States, it's estimated that smoking-related illnesses results in approximately $75.5 billion in healthcare costs each year. Further, businesses pay an average of $2,189 in workers' compensation costs for smokers. This is compared to $176 for non-smokers. Likewise, healthier workers are more productive workers. And it is clear that non-smokers are almost always healthier than smokers. This becomes clear when you're considering just a few examples of indirect costs associated with smoking. For example, smokers are absent from work 7 to 10 more days per year than non-smokers. Smoker breaks are disrupt work, take time away from business at hand, and may be viewed by some as kind of a rewarding behavior. One survey found that 3 15-minute smoking breaks a day amount to a full year of a worker's life spent on the job. The cleaning costs associated with smoking in the workplace total $4 billion per year. So businesses such as TriMet bear the burden of tobacco-caused illnesses, the resulting healthcare bills, which threatens profitability and optimal operation. The good news is that the human and economic toll of tobacco use is preventable and cost-effective. Today, you as the board of directors have the opportunity to authorize the adoption of a smoke-free work environment policy, which is a good step forward in going tobacco-free. A tobacco-free environment will not only reduce smoking exposure to secondhand smoke among employees and their families, but also save lives and save money. I strongly encourage the Board of Directors to authorize Resolution 1301-04 and direct the General Manager to adopt the implementation of a smoke-free work environment policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any questions for these two, or can we allow them to go back? There seems to be one more person who would like to testify. Questions?
Well, I may have questions for them, but I'd really like to hear the last one.
Okay, why don't we ask you to just take your seat back there, and we'll call you back up and get some questions, okay? So you're not off the hook entirely yet. All right, so.
You'd like me to stay?
Yeah, go ahead and sit down. Okay. Why don't we have Colleen Herman Franzen come up from the American Lung Association? I also believe we have some written information from that organization in front of you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. My name is Colleen Herman Franzen, and I'm here today on behalf of the American Lung Association of the Mountain Pacific which serves Oregon. Our mission is to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease, and we're here today to speak in support of this resolution. The Lung Association would first like to thank TriMet for your past and continued leadership in protecting the health of your employees. We were happy to work with you a few years ago when you made your transit centers and bus stations smoke-free. Today's resolution is another great step forward to a healthier workplace, and we commend you for this leadership. We would also like to thank the members of the Tri-County Smoke-Free Policy Work Group for their efforts towards this resolution. Second, we also wanted to commend TriMet for your commitment to providing quality, affordable health care for your employees, which includes tobacco cessation. We know from the Department of Health and Human Services that the best way to quit tobacco is through a combination of medication and counseling. Having reviewed your benefits, we're very pleased to see that they are in line with these recommendations. We've also had the opportunity to review your employee communications plan, and I can say that it's very comprehensive. It includes several face-to-face and written communications over a period of several months, so it was good to see that. And then lastly, as Dr. Cohn noted, in addition to protecting people from secondhand smoke, these policies really do help motivate people to quit. We know here in Oregon that 70% of adults who smoke want to quit. That's 70%. However, as the Lung Association, as a provider of smoking cessation programs, we know that quitting tobacco can be a very difficult process. They can often take people several attempts before they quit for good. Here in Multnomah County, the adult smoking rate is 15%. And we know that each year, almost half of those people try to quit. So they're making those quit attempts each year. And I believe that this policy will just provide another motivator to help those adults who are wishing to quit. So in closing, I just ask that you adopt this resolution to authorize a smoke-free work environment, and that will help protect your employees, visitors, and the public from secondhand smoke. So thank you for that time and opportunity to offer comments.
Thank you very much. So why don't you stay right there, and we'll see if we've got an extra spot. So is there questions, Travis, you'd like to have for some of our presenters?
Well, my first question is for Neil in regards to, as we read through the resolution, I guess I don't have the clarity needed in regards to how this is going to really change our current policy. When we say we're moving from kind of the workplace being smoke-free to being campuses and things like that, how is that specifically going to be enforced? Are we going to basically have everything that's TriMet property be smoke-free, and they would have to remove themselves entirely from the property?
That's right. And, you know, there is perhaps a provision of our union contract where we really need to bargain the impact of that with the union. So we'll have a conversation with the union about that as well. But there's no question to me that this is still the right thing to do and the right direction to move. I would just describe that right now people can smoke, for example, in the parking lots, which, as you know, remember our Center Street Administration building, you have to walk into the parking lot to get to the front door. Designated areas, we have shelters, for example, outside the report areas and all of our garages. And so right now, to some extent, we make it, if not easy, we make it quite possible people smoke on our property, and that's what would be changing. So we'd be sending a pretty strong signal, and hopefully at the same time some very positive messages about support and help to help change, to help break the addiction.
Well, I will start by saying that, you know, it's always challenging when you wear multiple hats, because certainly I'm completely and utterly for smoke-free environment, smoke-free campuses. We've got lots of data that tell us how detrimental it is, and the concept